tested. We bringing all the answers you requested. You guessed it, it's unrested. Teaching street Japanese lessons.
Unrested. Unrested.
Speaking of suicide, suicide goes back a long time in Japan. There's quite a huge history of suicide. And it begins with the Bushido code used by samurai. Okay? And pretty much in the most basic synopsis, that was pretty much a rule or code in which the samurai followed. And this one law within the Bushido pretty much had the idea of death before dishonor, which meant if a samurai was in a battle or a war or some kind of engagement in which their side lost or they lost, they were pretty much expected to kill themselves before, number one, surrendering, being captured, or being taken prisoner. And pretty much this became a ritualistic suicide that was eventually called seppuku. Okay, not seppuku. There's no seppuku. There's no harikari. That's another very bad mispronunciation of another Japanese word, but we're not going to go into that. We're just going to talk about seppuku. Okay? Even my own pronunciation isn't the best for that, but we'll deal with it. Okay, that pretty much loosely translates into stomach cutting. Okay? This is a little bit graphic, but pretty much what it entailed is the samurai would take a blade, dig it into the bottom of his belly, down here, and run it from one side to the other. Okay? And then pretty much right before they're about to, begin to die or begin to lose, obviously, loads of blood, they had a second in command or a retainer or however you want to translate it. Pretty much this was called the kaishaku, okay? And that's like their second in command, kind of like a squire to a knight, if you understand what I mean. And that person held a katana and pretty much gave the death strike that would end their life. That was called the Daki-kubi. And that death strike pretty much ended the samurai's life, and it was meant to almost completely behead the samurai. Eventually this became the popular way and most isamashi way to die, the bravest way to die. Sometimes lords could ask for a samurai to commit seppuku if they felt they had done something grievously wrong or had been betrayed by the samurai or they had made a grievous error. Okay? And this ritual was done in front of people, just as executions would be done in front of people in medieval Europe. And pretty much they would get dressed up in white robes. They would be fed their favorite meal, and once that meal was finished, they would remove the food from their plate, and on that plate they would put the knife that they would have to dig into their stomach. Okay? And they'd put it in there, and as I said before, the kaishaku, when given the signal, would make a strike that would almost behead the samurai. Now, it was expected that the kaishaku would almost completely behead him and hopefully not actually let the head fly off or, thud on the floor, because that was actually seen as dishonorable. They were supposed to leave just a little bit of it attached. I know it's a little bit graphic, but I'm just going into a little bit of detail as to how this whole ritual worked. Another thing that could be done, which was a different type of suicide, was if a servant to a lord had a disagreement that they wanted to voice, sometimes they would make the same wound, not quite as deep, and not from one end to the other end of their stomach, but enough that they would start to die slowly or bleed out slowly. They would then bandage themselves up, go to their lord, make their statement, and at the very end, reveal the wound to show the level of what they were trying to get across, how much it upset them, that they were now ready to die for what they had just said. So, you can see suicide had quite a big background during this era. And it was always seen as an honorable way to go out, and it was definitely better than surrendering or being captured or being taken prisoner or living in dishonor. According to, let me get this name right, Niigata University Graduate School of Medical and Dental Science, that's a very long name, so I have to look at a piece of paper to make sure I get it right. For the past 10 years, suicides in Japan have been 30,000 plus. The leading cause for death for people under the age of 30 is suicide. And 71% of suicides in Japan are men. And one of the leading causes is unemployment. The next one is lack of money. And the next one is loneliness, as according to a census taken by Niigata University. As some of you may have heard before, one of the big ways to commit suicide in Japan is jumping onto train tracks. And there's actually a train station close to me. It's a very, very big train station. And it has an express train. And what an express train means is that that train does not stop at certain stops. That means it comes through very, 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 very fast. These are hot spots for people to jump onto the tracks to get hit by the train. Some of these spots are so heavily used, in fact, that they have cops patrolling them to make sure there are people not jumping. They've also even added mirrors to the stations so that people can see themselves and are less likely to jump if they see themselves. Does that work? I don't know. One day I experienced this myself when a train was delayed by an hour. I wondered what had happened, and when I asked someone, they said someone in a wheelchair had decided to end their life and had wheelchaired themselves onto the tracks and died. So pretty gruesome there. And another really sad thing about this is that it's happened so much in Japan. They've had so many of these train suicides that before they used to just clean it up and take their losses and that was it. But now the train stations have to deal with these so much that they charge the family according to the amount that they've lost due to the suicide. So if the train's been delayed for, say, an hour, they do an estimation of all the people that would have been able to use the train, the amount they usually make during that hour, and then they charge the family that fee. They also charge them for the cleanup fee of the body. How do I feel about that? Some of it I can understand, but the fact that it's become that big of a problem shows the government needs to intercede at some point. Now, recently, the government has issued a white paper, a report in which they hope to reduce the suicide rate by 20%. It has yet to take effect or work at all.